Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. A very warm good morning to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you all to today's session of the Hindu Newspaper Analysis. We are bringing this session to you today at an odd time, that is 12, mainly because of some unavoidable reasons. But please note that from tomorrow onwards, we are going back to our original timing of 10 a.m. live. So make sure that from tomorrow onwards, you tune in at 10 a.m. as you do every single day. Let's see what are topics that we will be discussing in today's Hindu Newspaper Analysis. These are the topics that we have taken up for today's discussion. From the mains exam point of view, we'll be starting our discussion with a topic that is the G20 and the impact that the New Delhi Declaration has had on the world. Second, we'll be discussing about how AI regulations should be accelerated and how these regulations mainly should have children at the center of them. The third topic will be about a parliamentary panel that has recently submitted its report. Its recommendations mainly focus on how to improve higher education in India. The panel talks about the national education policy, what are the loopholes in it, and what we can do to achieve what recommendations have been given by this policy. Fourth topic about the northeastern part of India and how even today, after so many years, many people in India, including the policymakers, have not been able to understand the region, and the policies that are being made in this region are not up to the mark. From prelims point of view, we have a couple of news stories. First, the issue between Philippines and China about the South China Sea is alive once again, with Philippines claiming that China illegally has tried to barricade the boundary between Philippines and China. They have tried to put a rope there. They are arresting Philippines boats. Philippines is now protesting against that. And in the end, from science, how is it that the government of India is increasing the funding for research in the country and what impact will it have in the long run? Let's begin with the very first article. The first article, as you can see, is on the G20. Now, the first question that should come to everyone's mind is, we have had so many discussions about the G20. Almost everything that you need to know about the G20 has been discussed right here. From the history of the G20 to what the G20 is, the G20 summit, the outcomes, so on and so forth. So the question is, what remains now? Why are we still seeing articles about the G20? Because this article mainly says that while India played a great role in ensuring that there was a consensus in the New Delhi Declaration. For those of you who do not know, at the end of the G20 summit, we usually have a declaration. The name of the declaration is usually the host country's name. Now, the New Delhi Declaration that we had this time around, these declarations are only adopted when each and every country accepts this. Meaning that you have to ensure consensus and not just majority. For India, it was a big challenging task, mainly because of the Ukraine-Russia crisis. India, being a country that is friendly with Russia and the Western world, did not want to offend each of these. That is why we drafted the resolution in such a way that we did not specifically name Russia, but even the Western countries did support. No one expected this in the beginning. As per the author, the New Delhi Declaration that focuses on all these issues came as a big surprise, because most of the world did not really realize that India would be able to get a consensus. But this shows India's strength in the present moment. In the present moment, with India's stature rising all across the world, the nations around the world are realizing the significance of India, and that is why they appreciate India's efforts, and rather than debating against India's declaration, they have all been in favor of this. If you compare the New Delhi Declaration with the declaration of the last G20 summit that was held in Bali, there's a stark difference between the two. The Bali Declaration said that Russia is the offending country, they are the ones who have attacked, and they wanted the end of resolution. On the other hand, if you look at the New Delhi resolution, it talks about not Russia specifically. It just says that world over, wherever we have such conflicts, those conflicts have to come to an end. Meaning that, in other words, the New Delhi Declaration has a tone of resolution. They want to resolve the conflict. On the other hand, the Bali resolution was mainly in a tone of accusing a country, mainly that is Russia. The author here also says that all is good right now, but we have to be very careful of China. Why? First, Xi Jinping from China did not participate in the G20 summit. Secondly, while China also supported the New Delhi resolution, on the other hand, we saw that China also said a lot of statements which were not really in India's favor. For example, one of the biggest outcomes of the G20 summit for India specifically was the India Middle East European Economic Corridor. This also we have discussed earlier as well. Now, this corridor, as per many experts, is being seen as an alternative to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Now, obviously, China has a lot of money. They have invested this money in nations around the world, building infrastructure. It is being touted, that is, the India Middle East European Corridor is being touted as a kind of an alternative to the BRI. Chinese reaction to this was not negative in the beginning. They said that we welcome such infrastructure building, it will help the world economy. But China also said that this should not be used as a geopolitical tool. Similarly, there were some other leaders who raised the concerns, like the South Korean president said that the world right now is facing a lot of different types of challenges. China also said that although we support the New Delhi Declaration, but we also want to point out that G20 is now becoming more of a political tool rather than an economic tool. Now, what does it mean? Let me remind you how G20 started. The beginning of G20 1990s was mainly as a platform for discussing finance and economics. If you remember, in the late 1990s, we had the Asian economic crisis. Most of the South Asian countries were facing a lot of trouble because of foreign capital was coming out of their country at a rapid pace. This is when the leading countries around the world, leading economies, got together, had a meeting of their finance ministers and the governors of their central banks. This led to the beginning of the G20. So G20's roots, remember, are on the economic views, and they were formed mainly to ensure that there is economic stability around the world. However, now if you see G20 that was held in India or the last one in Indonesia, mostly the outcomes, the discussion are not really about economics. They are more about geopolitical strategies. They are more about conflict resolution. They are more about having strategies around the entire world, maybe climate change, AI, etc. So China, whose main focus always remains trade because that is the backbone of their economy, they have reminded once again that we have to make sure that the world goes back to what the original mandate of the G20 was, that is economic cooperation, and not really focus a lot on security and strategic issues. Another outcome, as per the author, is that we are now back in the era of the bipolar world. Bipolar world means a world where there are two superpowers. Whenever, as long as we had the Cold War, it was said that we are living in a bipolar world. The two poles at that point of time being the USSR and the US. However, after the Cold War ended, around the world, there was a kind of consensus that we are not in a bipolar world anymore. But as per the author, we are back there once again. How? The author says now, Western powers, mainly led by the US, NATO, they are the first pole, while the second pole is of Russia and China. How? Both of these groups are now trying to bring themselves as much power as possible. The NATO is trying to expand as much as possible. In fact, many believe that the starting point of Russia-Ukraine war was that Ukraine wanted to be a part of NATO. On the other hand, if you see Russia-China nexus, they are also trying to expand. You saw an extensive coverage of the North Korean leader coming on his special train to Russia and was treated like a king in Russia. So North Korea, Russia, China, you can also include Pakistan here, are trying to be the next pole or the second pole in the world. And again, we are back to an era where the countries are being forced to take sides. There is one other very interesting country here, that is Turkey. Now, we don't really talk about Turkey that often, but the reality is Turkey is a very extremely interesting country. Turkey is a part of NATO, which we don't realize. But on the other hand, Turkey is also extremely close to Russia. They have been supporting Russian actions in many other countries. In fact, Erdogan is extremely close to Vladimir Putin. Turkey was the one that was used as a negotiator, that acted as a negotiator in the famous Black Sea Grain Initiative as well. So there are countries that are trying to choose their side. There are countries such as Japan, South Korea, China that are not a part of NATO but still are treaty bound allies of the US. So we are living in a world where there are again two poles emerging. Where does India stand? India still officially says we are a non-aligned country. Author here is criticizing India. The author is saying it is time for India to realize the present situation. Look around the world. There are no successful countries right now that can claim to be non-aligned. If you have to be a significant country in the world whose decisions have an impact on various other parts of the world, you have to choose which side you are on. Because as per the author, just being on the sidelines, being non-aligned may have been an option earlier, but now it does not really seem to be an option. It's time to get over our success of the G20, that is all but over. Let's now look forward and how we can now leverage that position where we wanted to the world to come to a consensus and we were successful there. Now we have to make sure how our non-aligned movement has to be tweaked and how we become a part of the global world affairs. These are the important outcomes of the New Delhi Declaration. I'm sure you have read all of these already, but just to revise, the main pointers are about the Ukraine-Russia war. There was also a lot of discussion on grain, food, energy security, mainly because, as you know, Russia, Ukraine are some of the largest exporters of food grains, and because of the ongoing Ukraine-Russia war, countries, especially in Africa, have not been able to get their hands on these food grains. Then there were declarations on economic, financial market, on how health emergencies in the future should be dealt. There was a lot of focus on climate change, the need for funding to let the developing countries adopt cleaner energy, so on and so forth. The next article that we have here is about the question of AI, artificial intelligence. Around the world, this new buzzword of buzz technology, artificial intelligence, has also become a kind of a headache for the policymakers and lawmakers. The technology is emerging at such a fast pace that it is actually becoming a challenge to now differentiate reality with technology. We have seen so many morphed photos, videos coming out of even world leaders, and it's very difficult to differentiate between them and the real images. This is where we have to focus on AI regulation, and the world has been talking about this. The problem, however, is in all this AI regulation, we are not focusing on one very important part of a society that can get the most impacted by AI, that is children. And this is what this article talks about. It says that India is now about to host the Global Summit on Artificial Intelligence in October. We are also the chair of the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence. Thus, India can now take the lead, form these kind of laws in our country so that it can be used as an example for the other countries as well. As per the experts, the use of AI and integration of AI in our economy is expected to add $500 billion to India's economy by 2025, and it may make up 10% of our complete GDP. India has shown great examples to the world in a few areas that we don't really realize. I'll give you two examples. For example, when you talk about laws such as maternity leave, India has now one of the largest periods of maternity leave anywhere in the world, more than most of the advanced countries. Also, when it comes to child labor laws, India made changes in the child labor laws a few years back. We made sure that we increase the minimum age for child labor as well. Thus, India has an experience of making laws to look into those sections of the society that require certain help from the government. This is where the government also must realize its responsibility towards adolescents and children. The reason being that right now children are exposed to much more technology as compared to the earlier generation. They are much more hands on with all these tools, and you can't even deny the access of these tools to children. They are used in schools, colleges, all their peers are using it. So, how do you now regulate it? This becomes a big challenge. Problem is, these technologies are not designed for children specifically. There are some apps which have parental controls, etc., but even those are not foolproof. This becomes a big challenge for the government. As I said, there have been multiple instances of fake photos and videos going around. I'll give you a few examples. There is this photo that became viral of the wrestlers who were protesting at Jantar Mantar. When they were arrested by the police and they were taken away, there was a photo that was widely circulated. In the photo, the wrestlers were shown smiling, all happy in the bus while they were taken away by the police. That was the opposite of what happened. But it was an AI generated photo which looked as real as the real one. Now, this becomes a big challenge. For children whose minds are impressionable, that also is a problem. Right now, teens across the world are facing this problem of body shaming. You see those children scrolling through the Instagram reels. They don't realize that most of the people that see on Instagram, on photos and videos are using multiple filters, makeups, maybe AI generated photos and images. And then they compare their body to the body of those celebrities. And when the children are not happy, when they think that my body is not up to the mark, maybe I am not handsome or I am not beautiful, this is where you see many children going into depression and even taking the extreme step of hurting themselves. This is a big challenge for policymakers around the entire world. How to get rid of these body image issues, misinformation, cyberbullying, even radicalization. For India, the challenge is even bigger. India, as you know, is one of the most diverse countries in the world where people can get offended on a lot of different things. There are conflicts that we have seen in our history based on language, religion, caste, tribal identity. All of these have to be taken into consideration. Right now, rather than parents helping the children, the situation is the opposite. In most of the households right now, as you know, it is the parents that take help of the children to access these tools. How often do you see parents or elderly in your house going to the younger member in the family and asking them how to use Facebook, how to make an account, how to pay on Google Pay or Phone Pay or Paytm, etc. All this indicates that we are not in a situation where the elderly are guiding the young. It's the opposite that is happening. And this is where the government has to make sure that the AI regulations are in place. Now, do we have any international examples? Thankfully, we do. There are a few examples discussed here. The author says that if you look at UNICEF's guidelines, especially for policymakers on AI, they talk about how to make these policies. They talk about ensuring children's safety, children's non-discrimination, make sure they are included, etc. Around the world also, there are a few examples. For example, one in US, there is something called California's Age Appropriate Design Code that talks about what content can be visible to ages of what people, how to control the access of that content. We also have countries such as Australia that have launched something called Australia's Online Safety Youth Advisory Council. This is an agency mainly made up of the youth from 13 to 24 years. So it's not the elderly or the old people making policies for children. It is the youth that will be making policy for the youth, discussing all these issues and coming up with the solution. Now, let me share with you a few other things apart from this article. First, the article does make a very brief mention of the UNICEF's approach or UNICEF suggestions for the policymakers. Let me tell you in detail what are those. So if you go to UNICEF website, they will tell you that from the Convention on the Child of Rights, they have given 9 requirements that the policymakers must follow while making policies for AI, keeping children in mind. Make sure that it supports children's development, ensure the inclusion of and for children, protect their data privacy, let it be non-discriminatory, ensure their safety, transparency, empower the government and businesses, Also, create an enabling environment to prepare children for future developments as well. Similarly, the California's age appropriate design code that has been mentioned, this is how it works. So basically, it requires all the technology companies to do all these things. First, identify who are the children users and have the highest privacy setting for them, because their data should not be shared. Limit the collection of children's data, protect the data of the children that has been collected, end the practices that push children to spend money, don't have many options on children's app like games, etc., to spend money or options to pay. Also, have clear language on the terms of condition that even the children can read and understand, and have the best interest of the children in mind while designing your product. There were many surveys that also have been conducted in California about these design codes, and overwhelming number of people in California have supported these. This can also be something that India and other developing nations can adopt in their own policies. The third article that we have here is about the report of the parliamentary panel on the new education policy. So there was a parliamentary standing committee on education headed by BJP member of parliament Vivek Thakur. They just submitted a report. Report title is Implementation of the National Education Policy 2020 in Higher Education. So this panel mainly focused on higher education. They talked about some of the issues that are plaguing our higher education and what approach do we have to take to improve and make sure that all these shortcomings are addressed. The report says or gives a lot of data. For example, it says 1043 universities are functioning in the country. 70% under the State Act, 94% of students are in state or private institutions, 6% are in central higher education institutions. Basically, as you can see, in the higher education system, the share of central higher education is extremely low. Then, the issues that are discussed in this report are: number one, every district in the country should have at least one multidisciplinary HEI. HEI means again higher education institute. So every district in the country must have at least one of these institutions, and the gross enrollment ratio in the higher education, including vocational education, should increase from 26.3% that was in 2018 to 50% in 2035. All this data can be extremely important for you, quote, especially in the GS2 paper for you. These are the recommendations that they have given, starting with ensuring that there are suitable funds given to these higher education institutions to implement policy measures. Have clear targets for gross enrollment ratio. Basically, if 100 children are passing out of school of class 12, how many of them are now taking admission in college? That also has to increase. Give more financial assistance, make curriculum more inclusive, ensure that each and every child is served, increase the employability potential. You see so many reports in India coming time and time again that many youth in India, even though they may have a technical degree or education, are not employable because they do not have the skills that the companies require. So focus on that. Also, have specific instructional steps for those students who are physically challenged and enforced at all these places. The panel made a special mention of one single state of the union territory that has been the leader in implementing the new education policy, and that is Jammu and Kashmir. They appreciated how Jammu and Kashmir has implemented most of the provisions of the new education policy. It is the first union territory in the country to implement most of the measures in all higher education institutions. The report also focuses on the big problem of funding. They suggested that higher education financing agency, that is HEFA, its impact is not as much as was thought when the government had launched it. So it has to look into how it can collect more funds from the government and also explore partnerships from the private sector, donors, philanthropists who want to donate their own money. Apart from this, one big challenge in the new education policy, as per this panel, is the multiple exit program. Now, if you remember, the national education policy had a very interesting idea. For example, right now, BTech is a 4-year program. If you drop out of BTech in second year, third year, you will not get any degree as such. But with this policy, there was a provision. For example, you can drop out after second year, you can drop out after third year. You might still get a degree for diploma or a certificate. You will not get a full degree program, but a diploma degree. So that was a very interesting step. We see so many people for various reasons dropping out of college. Maybe they think that the college is not teaching them anything useful. Maybe there are some financial constraints. Maybe something happened in their life. Right now, if you have to drop before your 4-year period is over, you do not get anything to show for the effort that you put in. But this allows it, and it also allows you to join another college rightly in second, third year, for example. It's a very interesting idea, but again, the panel is saying it's very, very difficult to implement this. How will you implement? How will all the colleges make sure they're on the same page? Because see, let's say you drop out of a college after second year. Okay. Now you go to another college and join in the third year. How will that college make sure that their level of second year is the same as other colleges? Maybe what you read in the other college in 2 years is not enough as compared to the new college where you're coming in. So that is still a challenge as per this parliamentary panel. Now, since it focuses mainly on higher education financing agency, it is HIFA, I wanted to give you a few details about this. As the name suggests, this is a body mainly created to ensure enough funding that allows the higher education institutions to work in a sustainable manner. It is for capital asset creation in premier higher education institutions. It has been registered as a not-for-profit company under the Companies Act of 2013. It was established in 2017, so not a very old body. The interesting part is it's a joint venture amongst Ministry of Education, Government of India and Canara Bank. Do remember, this is the Canara Bank that has come in. The objective is simple: to ensure enough funds are available, especially for IITs, triple IITs, NITs, IAS, AIMS, etc. They can even get partnership from the private sector, invest most of that money in research and development going forward. The next article that we have here is based on some books that have been written recently, specifically a book that is called Identity and Marginality in Northeast India, Challenges for Social Sciences Research. Now, this article is mainly about how exactly do we deal with the problem of northeastern part of the country still not having appropriate policy measures. The northeastern part of the country, as you know, is extremely diverse. It is home to different tribes. It is home to people from different backgrounds. We are seeing what is happening in Manipur. One of the reasons why Manipur has seen so much violence, it has to be because there are different communities living together. And whenever there are issues that start developing, we see a situation where you either have a great bonding that has been developed over centuries, and if you don't, you will see these kind of protests. The other kind of problem is there has been a long history of the people from the northeast part of India being discriminated against when they travel in our own country. We have seen so many hate crimes against the people belonging from the northeast part of India taking place in the national capital, Delhi, and in other parts of the country as well. There are a lot of challenges associated with it. Therefore, the Government of India famously launched the BYJU'S Committee in 2014 to suggest how to ensure safety of people from the northeast states when they travel to the other parts of India specifically. The committee suggested multiple reforms, including having a special phone number, like you have the 100 number when you call the police, having a special phone number, especially in Delhi, making sure that their issues are addressed, it's given a top priority. The police officers that are assigned in these kind of cases or issues are very well aware of the different type of race identity where the northeast people belong to. However, even after this committee came into being, the suggestions they gave, many people did not really think that this will work in the long run. The author also is saying that despite the northeast part of India having different identities, one interesting thing is in almost all these states, women have to face the brunt. Because this area has been marked by violence of different types, ethnic clashes, clashes with the armed forces in many cases, we have seen that women have to come at the forefront and become the earning members of the family. The reason why the women have to become the earning members of the family is because the male member in the family gets killed or is involved in a conflict or is jailed, etc. You might say that see, so many northeastern states are matrilineal, meaning women are the earning members, they are the leaders of the family. But what we don't realize is, in many cases, they are being forced to become the leaders of the family. Because it's not by choice, it's just because their male members, which were the primary breadwinners, were either killed in a conflict or they were arrested or they are now missing. We have seen women-related issues in Manipur, for example, including malnutrition, post-traumatic stress, etc. In Nagaland, as you know, there has been a lot of opposition to women reservation in the local body polls. Why? Nagaland says that we have special status under Article 371A. It allows us to preserve our own culture, and our culture is that women cannot be a part of decision making. Our culture is that women cannot be in the position of power. So we will not accept 1/3 women reservation that is given to the local bodies. Not just this, as you know, Nagaland very recently passed a resolution in their assembly opposing the idea of uniform civil code. Uniform civil code has not even been implemented. There has just been talks and discussion about uniform civil code, and even then we see voices coming from Nagaland saying that no, we do not want this. Because again, they are saying under Article 371A, we have protection to preserve our own rights. This becomes a big challenge. The government of India cannot make policies which are blanket policies for northeast part of India. We have to realize that there are hundreds of different ethnicities and tribes that are living for many years, decades and centuries in the northeast part of the country. And one single policy of development or policy of any specific sector cannot really be enough to ensure that all of them are covered together. And this is what we have to focus on. I also wanted to give you a few details about the BYJU'S committee that was formed in 2014. Remember, this committee was formed after a series of attacks on people coming from the northeast in Delhi to study or to work, and they were attacked by the local residents. This is where this committee came into being. So they suggested reforms in policing, making sure that the offences are taken seriously. They suggested a new law also, where such kind of offences would be cognizable and non-bailable. They suggested how government should set up dedicated health centers on social media if the police is not reachable, like on Facebook, WhatsApp, etc. There should be dedicated public prosecutors, lawyers assigned from the government specially to fight cases for the victims for the northeast part of the country. At least half of these lawyers should be women. There should be special police stations to register FIRs in case people coming from the northeast are facing any harassment, and there should be fast track courts as well to make sure that these issues are resolved, and these issues have to be taken up on a priority basis and ended in a time-based manner. Now we come to some news stories from the prelims examination point of view. The first one is a conflict of the South China Sea between China and the Philippines. What has happened is, let me first show you a photo. Let's come to this. So this entire area is the South China Sea. As you know, every country has the right to have exclusive economic zone up to 200 nautical miles from their coastline. So up to 200 nautical miles, the countries have the right to explore minerals. However, China does not want that. China has been saying that historically, we are the ones, or our dynasties have controlled the South China Sea. It is in our backyard. The name itself says South China Sea. So we do not want anyone to control this. China says that this entire South China Sea is their territory. And this is where the problem starts. Because they are taking away the rights of the other countries to explore any mineral reserves, even fishing resources in this area. One of the countries involved in this conflict with China is the Philippines. Now, just a bit of history about Philippines. Philippines has a very old history of collaboration or a partnership, not partnership, but a history where America treated Philippines as a colony. In fact, Philippines was the only country that was made a kind of a colony by America. And after its independence, Philippines has maintained a very close relationship with the US even today. So in this region, it's not just Taiwan. Philippines also has a very, very close collaboration with the US. Just like France feels the responsibility about development of Africa because they were the ones who ruled over Africa mainly. Similarly, for Philippines, it is US that thinks that it is responsible for the security and helping Philippines. So what has happened is this area, that is Scarborough Shoal. This is the area where Philippines regards its own. But what China had done was China had put these kind of huge cables to suggest the fishermen that you cannot come to this part. These cables were put by the Chinese Coast Guard and net barriers so that the Philippines fishermen could not come here. What Philippines has done is they have gone there and removed these floating barriers that were preventing the Philippines boat from coming here. They were about 300-meter long barriers, and they say that these barriers at the Scarborough Shoal are illegal and illegitimate. Just to remind you, a few years back, even international tribunals had adjudicated cases between China and Philippines, and they have ordered in favor of Philippines, but as expected, China has never accepted. For example, in 2016, there was an arbitration set up under 1982 UN clause. China refused to accept the award given by this. They said that no, we do not accept any claim of any other country in this area. It is entirely our area. By the way, you might also have heard about something called the 9-line. Remember? 9-line. This is a line that China says that it is the boundary over which we will control the South China Sea. The interesting part is China is also making a lot of artificial islands in this area. So that when they make artificial islands, it will serve two purposes. First, from all those islands, again, they can claim 200 nautical miles as their exclusive economic zone. Secondly, even these islands can act as places where China can station its navy, where China can station its forces and keep an eye on the neighboring countries. Even countries such as Vietnam, as you see, have not been allowed to explore any mineral reserves of their coast because China thinks that no, entire South China Sea is their area. Now the 9-line. It's a very interesting term, 9-line, right? Do you know how did this term originate? There is no history behind this. 9-line is because when China for the first time published this map and said that South China Sea is our area, this is the line that they made. As you can see, this line has 9 dashes. So 9-line is nothing but a line made on the map by China having 9 dashes. The interesting part was earlier it used to be 11-line. It's the same. So earlier when Chinese made a map, they used 11 dashes, so it became the 11-line. Later on, when they published a map, it had 9 dashes, so it became known as 9-line. So dash is the normal dash that we use in day-to-day life. There is no deeper meaning attached to it. Now, as I said, this is a historical demarcation that China has used. They claim 90% of the South China Sea is their territory. They do not believe any recommendation or any award given by the Permanent Court of Arbitration under the UN clause, that is UN Convention on the Law of Sea. That is why China has been extremely vocal and aggressive. Whenever any country lays any claim on any of these, China does not take it lightly. For example, if you look at Vietnam, do you know Vietnam invited ONGC Videsh to be exact, to come and explore mineral reserves of their coast. But again, China did not take it. So China has long been claiming that this entire sea is their area. The last news story is about NRF and how will it help the country in getting more out of our research institutions. NRF here stands for National Research Foundation. The National Research Foundation here, as you can imagine, is a foundation mainly created to ensure that there are enough funds available for research. See, any developed country has one thing in common. They have been giving a lot of focus on research. A huge part of their expenditure goes into research. Look at Israel, a country in the middle of a desert. They have mastered the technology of desalination. They have mastered the technology of making state-of-the-art weapons. Look at the size of their country. Look at the population of their country. And even then, just because they have focused so much on research, funded so much research, that they have been able to ensure positive outcomes. Similarly, we have our National Research Foundation. It has a budget of 50,000 crore over 5 years, mainly to give boost and research to our country's research facilities. Take a very simple example. Why is it that you see most of the inventions coming in from US or the European countries? Why is it that the first and the most advanced COVID vaccines came in from the US, Moderna, Pfizer vaccines? Because of the research budget they have. If you give a scientist 1,000 crore rupees, the scientist should have this confidence that even if my experiment fails in the end, government will again give me another 1,000 crore rupees, because they also know no one can be successful in just first attempt. You need to have multiple iterations, and this is where funding and help from the government becomes extremely important. This is the importance of National Research Foundation. Here are a few things that you need to know. Number one, what does it aim to do? It aims to promote interdisciplinary research, minimize duplication efforts. So if there are multiple research institutions, multiple universities, if one research has been done at one university, it should not be repeated again. Whatever outcomes we have had should be shared with everyone. We should have translation of research into practice also, not just leave it on the paper, also develop products and make it available in the market. Expectations are India's investment in research and development should increase from 0.7% of the GDP to at least 2% of the GDP by 2030. Increase our share of global scientific publication, where right now China is leading, by the way, and along with US, from 5% to 7% by 2030. Have a pool of talented researchers both in private and public sector. Translate scientific knowledge into economic benefits. See, if you look around the world, yes, India's IT sector is extremely famous. But can you think of any great IT invention or IT website or product that was made in India? No. Most of the consumer-facing products or websites are actually made in US or European countries. Most of the apps that you are using right now, where you spend your time, are not really made in India. Because yes, we have a lot of technical knowledge, but we do not really implement that and bring it into a product. This is a big challenge. This brings us to the end of today's discussion. Here are a couple of practice questions as always. Make sure you take out time to answer these two. You have to move over to our Telegram channel after this session ends to practice a quiz based on the topics that we discussed. Make sure you use the answer writing portal as well. You can check each other's answers, give each other feedback on this portal. Link for both Telegram and our answer writing portal is given in the description of the video. From tomorrow, we are going back to our original time of 10 a.m. Don't forget to join us at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.